They say the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the children you raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. My name is Margaret Ellis, a retired registered nurse in my late 60s. For 32 years, I worked brutal night shifts, holidays, and endless overtime. I mopped hospital floors, comforted dying patients, and held grieving family members while my own needs always sat on the back burner. Every extra dollar I earned went toward one single dream, the lake house my husband, Robert, and I had dreamed about since our wedding day. For decades, we skipped vacations, drove beat-up old cars, and denied ourselves small comforts. Robert labored long construction hours through sweltering summers and freezing winters. Nail by nail, board by board, we turned our quiet lakeside dream into reality. That cabin was not just wood and glass. It held every memory we had. The porch swing Robert hung with his own hands, the large kitchen window where we watched sunsets over the water, the bedroom where we planned our peaceful golden years together. It was our sanctuary, our reward for a lifetime of struggle. Tragedy struck only 2 years after we moved in. Robert fell ill with a rapid aggressive illness and passed away before we could enjoy many seasons in our perfect home. Grief weighed heavy on my shoulders, but the lake house kept me going. Every corner whispered his name. Standing on that porch, I could almost feel him beside me. I had one child, my daughter Lindsay. I poured my life into raising her. I gave her college money, helped with her wedding, and supported her and her husband Tyler whenever trouble appeared. After Robert's death, I welcomed them constantly to the lake house. I hoped their visits would chase away my loneliness. I cooked their meals, cleaned up their messes, and let them treat my private sanctuary like their personal vacation spot. Slowly my generosity turned into expectation. Lindsay and Tyler began dropping cruel little comments. The house was too large for a lonely older woman. I was wasting prime lakefront property. They were young, they should get to enjoy this beautiful place. Hints turned into complaints. Complaints turned into plans I never saw coming. One crisp Saturday morning, I loaded groceries into my car and drove the 40-minute trip out to the lake. I looked forward to drinking coffee on the swing and listening to the water lap against the shore. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my stomach instantly dropped. Brand new shiny deadbolts sat on every exterior door. I pulled out my old set of keys. None of them fit. The locks had been completely changed. All ground floor windows were latched tight. Before I could process what I was seeing, the front door swung open. Lindsay stepped onto the porch with her arms crossed tight. Tyler stood right behind her, his expression cold and entitled. There was no guilt, no hesitation in either of their faces. "Mom, don't make a scene," Lindsay said flatly, her voice void of warmth. "This house is too much work for you at your age. Tyler and I are taking over. We changed every lock. You are no longer welcome here." Groceries slipped out of my shaking hands and tumbled onto the gravel. Milk cartons cracked, fruit rolled across the drive. I stared at the daughter I had raised, the man she married, and the home my late husband and I had built with our blood and sweat. I could barely breathe. "This is my house," I whispered, my throat tight with tears. "Every cent, every hour of labor belongs to Robert and me. How could you lock me out?" Tyler let out an annoyed sigh and stepped forward. "Look, it will pass to Lindsay anyway once you're gone. We're just getting a head start. Go back to your small city apartment. This place is for us now." They shut the front door in my face. The click of the new deadbolt echoed across the quiet lake shore. I stood alone in the driveway, watching the porch swing rock gently in the breeze. Locked out of the memory-filled home that meant more to me than anything in the world, sadness burned inside me, but something harder began to surface. I had spent my whole life being gentle, forgiving, and accommodating. My kindness had been mistaken for weakness. Lindsay and Tyler thought I would simply accept this injustice and disappear. They seriously underestimated me. I stood in that gravel driveway for a long, cold minute, staring at the closed front door of the home Robert and I had built from nothing. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Grief had made me soft for far too long. It had let my daughter and her husband take, and take again, until they'd grown bold enough to steal my home outright. I bent down slowly, picking up the broken cartons and scattered fruit from the ground. My hands no longer shook with heartbreak. They steadied with quiet, unshakable resolve. I was no longer just a grieving widow, a lenient mother, a retired nurse who spent her life caring for ungrateful people. I was the owner of that lake house. And I would not be pushed out of my own legacy. I walked back to my car, tossed the ruined groceries into the trunk, and sat behind the wheel. Through the windshield, I could see Lindsay and Tyler moving casually through the front windows, rearranging my furniture, laughing like they'd just won a prize. They were already making themselves at home in the life they'd stolen from me. Any other mother would have screamed, begged, or caused a scene. But 30 years in emergency rooms taught me one vital lesson: emotion clouds judgment. Patience wins fights. I did nothing that day. I simply started my car and drove away, their arrogance swelled with my silence. They mistook my calm for surrender, my restraint for helplessness. They thought I was too old, too lonely, and too weak to fight back. They were wrong. The second I returned to my small city apartment, I locked the door and pulled out every single document I had spent years organizing. I spread them across my dining table, the original land deed signed by Robert and me, every construction receipt dating back 28 years, decades of bank statements proving our sole payments, tax records, insurance files, and the official property title bearing only my name and my late husband's. Lindsay and Tyler had foolishly assumed the house was unofficial inheritance, free for them to claim early. They had no proof of investment, no legal stake, no right to a single square foot of that lakefront land. Every brick, every fixture, every dollar tied to the home belonged exclusively to me. Next, I gathered proof of their trespass and theft. I pulled up dozens of photos and videos I'd taken over the years, footage of them using my home, enjoying my property, living off my sacrifice while contributing nothing. I saved text messages where they'd admitted they had no plans to help maintain the house, only to enjoy its benefits. I even tracked down the local locksmith's public service records, confirming they'd paid to illegally rekey a property they did not own piece by piece. I built my case point 2 days later. Lindsay texted me casually, as if she hadn't just stolen my lifelong dream and locked me out of my most precious memories. Don't bother coming back to the lake house. We're redecorating this week and turning the guest room into an office. It's better this way, Mom. You get to relax in the city, and we'll handle the house responsibilities. I stared at the message, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. They weren't handling responsibilities. They were erasing every trace of Robert and me from our own home. I didn't reply with anger. I sent one short, neutral message: I understand. I'll respect your decision for now. Lindsay immediately sent a triumphant emoji, convinced she'd broken me. Tyler even texted separately, cocky and dismissive, good. No hard feelings. Just know this place is ours now. Their overconfidence became their biggest mistake. With no pushback from me, they grew reckless. They began posting lavish photos on social media, Tyler grilling on Robert's custom patio, Lindsay sipping wine on my porch swing. Both of them posing in front of the lake view we'd spent decades building. They bragged to friends about their new vacation home, lied about inheriting the property early, and boasted about how they'd finally taken the house from my lonely, useless old self. I saved every post, screenshot every lie, document every illegal occupancy. By the end of the week, my legal folder was thick with irrefutable evidence. I called my family attorney, scheduled an immediate meeting, and laid every detail out on his desk. The lawyer looked stunned as he reviewed my files. Margaret, this is open and shut criminal trespassing, illegal lockout, and attempted property conversion. They have zero legal claim. You can not only force them out, you can press formal charges. I nodded slowly, my heart steady and resolute. I didn't want petty arguments or messy family fights. I wanted justice. I wanted my home back. And I wanted my entitled daughter and her greedy husband to learn the brutal lesson no one had ever taught them: kindness is never a free pass for exploitation. That afternoon, the official court summons was filed. Lindsay and Tyler were about to discover that locking a mother out of her own dream house was not a clever shortcut to an early inheritance. It was the worst mistake of their lives. The court summons arrived at the lake house on a bright, sunny Tuesday morning, the exact kind of day Robert and I once spent drinking coffee on the porch and watching the lake glisten under the sunlight. Lindsay later told me she initially thought it was junk mail. She'd grown so confident in her stolen victory that she never once considered I would fight back. She tore open the envelope casually, scrolling through the printed lines with a lazy, dismissive attitude, until her eyes froze on the words formal trespass lawsuit and property violation. Her careless smile vanished in an instant. Tyler found her standing in the middle of the living room, paper trembling in her hands, face drained of all color. He snatched the summons from her grip, scanning the legal jargon quickly, and his cocky confidence crumbled just as fast. They were being sued. Officially. Publicly. Legally. Up until that moment, their takeover had felt like a harmless loophole, a convenient way to claim an early inheritance. They'd laughed about my loneliness, mocked my quiet obedience, and bragged to every friend about how easily they'd taken my dream home. They'd truly believed I was too old, too passive, and too heartbroken to fight. That they'd never imagined I'd turn their selfish betrayal into a criminal legal matter. Panic set in fast. Within 10 minutes, my phone exploded with non-stop calls and frantic texts from Lindsay. I ignored every single one. For years, I'd dropped everything for her. I'd answered her midnight crisis calls, paid her overdue bills, comforted her through every trivial heartbreak, and sacrificed my own peace to fix her mistakes. Now, it was her turn to wait. By noon, she showed up pounding on my apartment door, Tyler right behind her, both of them breathless and frazzled. Their perfect, entitled facades were gone, replaced by raw, unmasked panic. When I opened the door, Lindsay immediately pushed past me, tears welling in her eyes. Switching straight into her familiar guilt-tripping act. "Mom, how could you do this?" she cried. "Suing your own daughter? Pressing criminal charges over a house? You're being cruel and unreasonable. This is family, not a courtroom." Tyler crossed his arms, trying to reclaim his lost arrogance, though his shaky voice betrayed his fear. "You're taking this way too far. We're your family. We were just looking after the house for you. You're willing to ruin our lives over some property?" I stood in my quiet entryway, staring at the two people who'd locked their grieving mother out of her only happy memory. And I felt zero sympathy left in my heart. "You weren't looking after anything," I said calmly, my voice steady and unwavering. "You changed my locks, stole my home, erased my husband's memories, and bragged publicly about robbing me. You thought my kindness was weakness. You thought I'd never fight back." Lindsay's tears turned to anger. "This is unfair. The house is supposed to be mine when you die. We just moved in early. Why are you punishing me for wanting my inheritance?" "Inheritance is gifted after death," I replied firmly. "It is not stolen while someone is still breathing, still grieving, and still the legal owner. You didn't wait for anything. You robbed me." Tyler stepped forward, tone turning aggressive and threatening. "Drop the lawsuit right now, Margaret. This is your last chance. If you keep this up, we'll tell everyone you're a bitter, heartless mother who sues her own family. We'll ruin your reputation." I almost laughed at his empty threat. "Save your lies for the judge," I told them. "I have every text, every social media post, every locksmith record, and every property deed to prove exactly what you did. You have zero proof of ownership, zero proof of contribution, and zero excuses for your illegal takeover." I paused, letting my words sink in hard. "You locked me out of the home I built with my dying husband. You mocked my grief. You celebrated stealing my legacy. Now you face the consequences." Cornered and desperate, Lindsay dropped her angry act entirely, crumbling into desperate begging. She grabbed my hands, clinging to me like a scared child, ignoring the fact that she'd just destroyed our entire family bond. "Mom, please. We made a mistake. We were selfish. We'll give you full access back. We'll move out tomorrow. Just drop the lawsuit. Criminal charges will ruin our careers, our credit, our future. Please forgive us." I pulled my hands away from hers slowly, finally letting go of the motherly mercy I'd wasted on her entire life. "You didn't show me mercy when I stood crying in that gravel driveway," I said softly. "You didn't care about my future when you stole my home. I will not care about yours." I walked to the door and held it open, my final verdict clear. "The court date is set. Let the judge decide the truth." Defeated and terrified, Lindsay and Tyler stumbled out of my apartment. They left with no more lies, no more arrogance, no more false confidence. For the first time, they understood the terrifying truth. They had picked a fight with the wrong person, and the worst part of their punishment was still waiting for them in court. The day of the court hearing arrived gray and solemn, matching the heavy weight in my chest. For the first time in my life, I was not stepping into a room to heal, to comfort, or to sacrifice. I was here to defend myself. I dressed simply and quietly, just as I had for most of my life. No drama, no theatrics. I carried only one folder, thick and heavy with proof. Proof of decades of sacrifice, proof of their cold betrayal, proof of the lies they'd woven to steal my home. Lindsay and Tyler arrived last, and I almost didn't recognize them. Gone were the cocky, entitled smiles. They wore stiff, cheap formal clothes, their faces pale and tight with anxiety. They'd styled themselves as humble, remorseful young adults, ready to play the victim card in front of the judge. As soon as the hearing opened, their lawyer spun a heartbreaking lie. "Your Honor," he began smoothly. "This is a simple misunderstanding between a grieving mother and her loving daughter. After Mrs. Ellis lost her husband, she fell into deep loneliness and instability. She could no longer maintain the large lake property safely. My client stepped in out of compassion. They changed the locks only for house security, not to steal anything. They were simply helping their mother protect her home." My blood ran cold. He painted Lindsay and Tyler as devoted, caring family members who'd selflessly taken care of me in my fragile state. He framed me as a bitter, unstable widow attacking her own children over a simple miscommunication. Lindsay nodded tearfully, fake tears streaming down her cheeks. Tyler stared at the floor, pretending to be heartbroken over our broken family bond. The courtroom watched them with sympathy. For a moment, I feared their performance would work. Family drama always leaned toward mercy, especially when young children appeared to be the injured party, but I had proof. My lawyer stood and dismantled their entire fake narrative in seconds. First, he submitted the original property deed, signed solely by Robert and me. No other names. No joint ownership. No future inheritance clauses. The house was mine, fully and legally. Next, he laid out 28 years of construction receipts, land tax payments, utility bills, and loan records, every single payment made by my late husband and me. There was not a single dollar from Lindsay or Tyler in nearly 3 decades. There is no evidence these two defendants have ever invested, maintained, or contributed to this property in any way, my lawyer stated firmly. Zero labor. Zero payments. Zero upkeep. The judge's gaze shifted, sharp and skeptical. Toward my daughter and son-in-law, their fake remorse wavered, then came the killing blow. My lawyer displayed their social media posts one by one on the courtroom screen. Photos of them partying at my lake house, mocking my loneliness, bragging about stealing the property early, and celebrating the fact that they'd locked me out for good. The captions burned bright and damning. Finally took the lake house for ourselves. Mom's too old and sad to deserve it. No more waiting for inheritance. We own this place now, best upgrade ever. Kicked the empty nester out. The entire courtroom went silent. Lindsay's fake tears dried instantly. Her face flushed bright red with shame and panic. Tyler stiffened in his chair, his jaw tight, realizing their own reckless arrogance had just convicted them. My lawyer followed up with the text messages and locksmith records, proving they'd deliberately rekeyed my private property with malicious intent. Fully aware I had every legal right to be there, this was not compassion, he said firmly. This was premeditated trespass, illegal lockout, and willful property theft. These two defendants exploited their mother's grief, took advantage of her kindness, and attempted to steal a home built on a lifetime of sacrifice. When I took the stand, I spoke softly but steadily. Your Honor, I do not sue for money. I do not sue out of anger. I sue because I built that home with my late husband's blood, sweat, and dreams. It is the only place I still feel close to him. I sacrificed my youth, my rest, and my savings to give my daughter a good life. I never once expected betrayal. I looked directly at Lindsay, my heart heavy but unbroken. I raised her to be grateful. I never taught her to steal from the person who gave her everything. The judge leaned forward, her tone stern and final. The court finds the defendants guilty of criminal trespass, illegal property lockout, and unauthorized occupancy. Their claims of compassionate intervention are entirely disproven by overwhelming evidence. She turned to Lindsay and Tyler, her voice sharp with disapproval. You have shown zero gratitude, zero remorse, and zero respect for the woman who gave you life and support. You exploited grief for greed, and you attempted to steal property you did not earn and do not own. The verdict crashed over them like a wave. The judge ordered them to vacate the lake house within 24 hours, restore all original locks, repair any damage they'd made to the property, and pay all court fines and legal fees in full. But that was not all. In a final, decisive ruling, she added one clause that shattered every hope they had left. The court formally flags this case in permanent family estate records. Should Mrs. Ellis pass away in the future, this act of fraudulent property theft disqualifies both defendants from any inheritance claims related to this home. Lindsay gasped aloud. They lost the house. They lost the lawsuit. They lost their legal right to ever inherit it in the future. Their greedy, selfish gamble had cost them everything. The moment the judge slammed her gavel and dismissed the court, the fragile last thread of our mother-daughter bond snapped completely. The sympathy the courtroom had once held for Lindsay and Tyler vanished, replaced by quiet judgment as everyone watched them slump out of their seats, defeated and humiliated. But instead of remorse or shame, burning resentment flashed across my daughter's face. There were no more fake tears, no more pleading smiles, no more attempts to play the innocent victim. All that remained was raw, bitter hatred, for me, for the verdict, for the life of greed they'd just lost. They stormed out of the courtroom without a single glance in my direction, their shoulders rigid with rage. I walked out slowly behind them, my legs still trembling, but my heart lighter than it had been in months. I'd won the legal battle, reclaimed every right to my home, and stripped them of the unearned inheritance they'd spent months plotting to steal. I'd expected them to be upset. I'd expected anger and silence. But I never expected how far they'd go to get their revenge. The 24-hour eviction deadline hung over their heads, and panic pushed them further into selfish, irrational chaos. That evening, I drove out to the lake house to check on the property, hoping to breathe in the quiet peace Robert and I had built. But when I rounded the tree-lined curve leading to the driveway, my blood ran cold. The front yard was torn apart. The flower beds I'd planted with Robert's help were trampled flat, every blooming crushed under careless boots. The wooden patio furniture we'd refinished together was scraped and scuffed, cushions ripped open and tossed across the grass. The porch swing, Robert's favorite project, the one he'd hung for me with endless patience, was hanging lopsided, its chains bent and loosed. I rushed to the front door, my heart pounding, and found the new locks they'd installed broken and pried open. Inside, the damage was worse. They hadn't just packed their things. They'd vandalized every corner of the home out of pure spite. The freshly painted walls were covered in scuff marks and deep scratches. The kitchen cabinets we'd built together were dented and chipped. They'd left trash scattered across every room, spilled drinks staining the wooden floors, and ruined the delicate window curtains I'd sewn by hand. Worst of all, they'd removed every small photo frame of Robert and me, tossing our wedding photos and anniversary portraits into a crumpled pile on the floor. They weren't just leaving the house. They were destroying every trace of our happiness, punishing me for daring to defend what was mine. Before I could process the wreckage, my phone rang. It was Lindsay, her voice sharp, venomous, and unhinged, no trace of the gentle daughter I'd raised. Happy now? She snapped bitterly. You ruined our future, embarrassed us in court, and stripped us of our inheritance. You chose a stupid house over your own child. I stared at the wreckage surrounding me, at the broken memories of my late husband, and my voice came out steady and cold. I didn't choose a house over you. You chose greed and betrayal over your mother. I spent my whole life giving you everything. You spent every chance you had repay me by stealing and destroying what I love. Tyler grabbed the phone from her mid-sentence, his tone aggressive and threatening. This isn't over, Margaret. You think a court ruling stops us? You disgraced our family name, cost us thousands in fines, and ruined our chance at this property. We're not moving on quietly. We're going to make you regret every single choice you made today. The call cut off abruptly. I stood alone in the damaged lake house, surrounded by wreckage and broken memories, and realized their defeat had only fueled their retaliation. They weren't done fighting. They weren't ready to accept the consequences of their actions. I spent the rest of the night cleaning up their mess, repairing what I could, and replacing the broken locks with brand new, high-security deadbolts. I documented every scratch, every stain, every act of vandalism, saving photos and videos for my legal team. If they wanted to keep fighting dirty, I would be ready. Early the next morning, I received a shocking alert from my lawyer. Lindsay and Tyler had filed an appeal against the judge's inheritance disqualification clause. They'd hired a new lawyer, submitted false statements claiming I'd acted out of parental cruelty, and were attempting to reverse the court's ruling. Worse, they'd filed a minor countersuit, claiming emotional distress and wrongful public humiliation. They were dragging this war out, refusing to surrender, determined to drain my energy, my money, and my peace until I caved. Just as I processed the news, a neighbor from the lake community sent me a frantic text. She'd caught Lindsay and Tyler lingering by the tree line at the edge of my property late the night before, snapping photos of the house and whispering suspiciously to each other. They were watching me, planning something new, waiting for their next chance to strike. The courtroom victory had never been the end. It had only been the beginning of a far darker, more personal battle, one between a mother fighting to protect her last memories, and a selfish daughter willing to destroy everything to get what she wants. The neighbor's warning lingered in my mind long after I read it. Lindsay and Tyler were lurking, plotting in the shadows, and I knew their quiet surveillance was not idle curiosity. They were cooking up something desperate, something underhanded, and I had no intention of being caught off guard again. After finishing the last of the repairs at the lake house, I installed full exterior security cameras around the entire property. I positioned discreet night vision lenses along the tree line, the driveway, and the backyard dock, every blind spot where someone could sneak in undetected. After being betrayed by my own blood, I would never leave my sanctuary vulnerable again. I also forwarded all the vandalism footage, neighbor witness statements, and their ongoing harassment records straight to my attorney. He warned me their appeal and countersuit was nothing more than a delay tactic. They had no legitimate evidence, no legal ground to stand on, and were simply trying to wear me down with endless legal fees and emotional exhaustion. They're banking on you giving up, my lawyer told me firmly. They think an older, grieving widow will grow tired, settle quietly, and let them regain leverage. Don't give them that satisfaction. I had no plans to surrender. For 3 days, the lake property stayed quiet. No sign of Lindsay or Tyler, no strange cars, no lingering shadows. I almost began to think they'd backed off, worn out by the court loss and mounting fines. But the calm was only a dangerous lull before their next attack. On the 4th morning, I woke up to a flood of confusing, concerned messages from my closest friends and former hospital coworkers. They all sent me screenshots of a new social media post, shared widely across local community groups, family forums, and neighborhood pages, posted from Lindsay's account. The lengthy paragraph painted me as a cruel, cold-hearted, unforgiving mother. She twisted the entire truth, claiming I'd abandoned her as a child, neglected her needs, and now greedily hoarded property while punishing my own daughter out of pure bitterness. She lied that I'd threatened to disinherit her over a simple misunderstanding, that I'd abused my legal power to publicly humiliate her and Tyler, and that I was willing to destroy my family's future just to feed my own pride. Worst of all, she attached heavily edited photos, cropped shots of the damaged house interior, framed to make it look like I'd destroyed my own home to falsely accuse them of vandalism. Tyler shared the post immediately, adding aggressive comments claiming I was mentally unstable, unfit to own property alone, and should be legally evaluated and removed from my own home for my own safety. They'd launched a full public smear campaign. They weren't just fighting for the lake house anymore. They were fighting to ruin my reputation, destroy my character, and turn the entire local community against me. Their goal was clear: manufacture public sympathy, pressure the court into overturning the verdict, and convince people I was the toxic, ungrateful party in our broken family. Within hours, cruel comments poured in from strangers who'd bought their lies. Some accused me of being a heartless mother. Others urged local authorities to investigate my mental state. A few even called for me to be forced to sell the lake house for family reconciliation. My quiet, peaceful life was being torn apart online by the two people I'd spent a lifetime loving and supporting. Before I could process the tidal wave of harassment, my security camera system sent an emergency motion alert to my phone. I pulled up the live feed, and my blood ran cold. Lindsay and Tyler were standing at the edge of my tree line again. But this time they weren't just taking photos. They carried spray paint cans, small tools, and a folded bundle of flyers. They were sneaking onto my private property again, bold and reckless. Convinced their online campaign had already tarnished my name enough that no one would believe me if I reported them. I watched in real time as they scrawled crude, false accusations across my backyard wooden fence, posting defamatory flyers on every tree, every utility post, every edge of my land. They were planting physical evidence to back up their online lies, staging the scene to make it look like I was the abusive, unreasonable one. But they made one catastrophic mistake every single second of their illegal trespass. Their vandalism and their malicious scheme was being recorded in crystal clear, high-definition footage. Every lie they spoke, every malicious act they committed, every illegal step they took on my private property was permanently documented. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I simply saved every file, backed up every clip, and forwarded the entire security log straight to my lawyer and the local sheriff's office. Their desperate plan to destroy me was about to backfire harder than anything they could have imagined. The sheriff's patrol car arrived at my lake house less than 20 minutes after I submitted the security footage. By that time, Lindsay and Tyler had already fled the property, thinking they'd gotten away clean. They'd left behind spray-painted slander across my fence, stacks of defamatory flyers fluttering in the wind, and a trail of fresh footprints leading back to the road, all stupid, careless proof of their illegal trespass. The deputy reviewed my camera footage on the spot. The video was unshakable evidence, clear, unedited, and time-stamped. It showed Lindsay and Tyler sneaking onto my land, vandalizing my private property, and deliberately staging false evidence to support their online smear campaign. There was no room for interpretation, no way to twist the truth. This is premeditated harassment and criminal mischief, the deputy said firmly. They didn't just trespass. They staged a crime scene to defame you publicly. He issued an official police report and placed a formal trespass warning on record. If they stepped foot on my property again, they would be arrested immediately. More importantly, the police documentation became the final nail in the coffin for their countersuit and appeal. While the legal ground crumbled beneath them, their online campaign continued to spiral out of control. Strangers were still commenting on Lindsay's posts, questioning my sanity, bashing my character, and demanding I make peace with my daughter. For a short while, it felt like the whole town believed their lies. I remained silent online. I did not post angry replies, did not argue with trolls, and did not beg for public sympathy. I knew noisy denial never wins against quiet, irrefutable proof. That night, my lawyer released a controlled, evidence-based public statement on my behalf. He attached the full, uncut security footage, time-stamped police records, witness neighbor statements, and the original court verdict. He included side-by-side comparisons, Lindsay's heavily edited photos versus the raw camera footage proving they were the ones who vandalized the house. He showcased their unfiltered social media boasts from months prior, proving their long-term scheme to steal my lake house. The internet flipped overnight. The public saw the truth in shocking clarity. The poor, wronged daughter and her struggling husband were not victims at all. They were greedy, manipulative liars who'd locked their grieving mother out of her own home, vandalized her property, and fabricated an entire narrative to destroy her reputation. The same commenters who'd accused me of cruelty began flooding Lindsay's posts with outrage. Local residents condemned their calculated harassment. My former hospital coworkers shared stories of my decades of kindness, patience, and selfless care for others, further dismantling the false image they'd built of me as a cold, bitter woman. Lindsay and Tyler's public sympathy evaporated in hours, replaced by widespread shame and backlash. Desperate to salvage their collapsing reputation, they attempted one last damage control move. They deleted all their defamatory posts, blocked dozens of angry locals, and posted a vague, passive-aggressive update claiming family misunderstandings had been blown out of proportion and begging people to stop harassing them. But it was too late. Screenshots and video clips had already been saved, shared, and circulated across every local platform. Their lies were permanent, and their credibility was completely destroyed in the community. The next morning, I received devastating news from my attorney, based on the new criminal trespass evidence and proven defamation campaign. The court had officially dismissed their appeal and thrown out their entire countersuit. Not only that, the judge ruled their malicious public harassment qualified as aggravated harassment, opening them up to additional fines and even potential misdemeanor charges. They were losing on every front, yet even in the face of total defeat, their stubborn entitlement refused to break. Instead of surrendering, they turned to an even more desperate, personal tactic no one saw coming. They reached out to me privately. Not to apologize, but to bargain. Lindsay texted me in a cold, ultimatum tone: no remorse, no humility, pull all police reports and drop any further legal action. Delete all the footage online. If you do that, we'll leave you alone forever. If you refuse, we'll take things even further. You don't know what we're capable of. The veiled threat sent a sharp chill down my spine. I realized in that moment this was no longer just a fight over a house or inheritance. This was a battle against two bitter, ungrateful people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, even if it meant threatening their own mother. I stared at Lindsay's threatening text for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. There was no longer a hint of the little girl I'd raised, the child I'd comforted through fevers, spoiled with birthdays, and sacrificed countless nights for. This was a stranger, cold, cunning, and unhinged by defeat. I did not reply to her ultimatum. Bargaining with people who thrive on intimidation only invites more abuse. Instead, I forwarded the threatening message directly to my lawyer and the sheriff's office. Adding it to the ever-growing stack of evidence documenting their harassment, both parties warned me the same thing: Lindsay and Tyler were acting out of extreme desperation. With their appeals dead, their public reputation ruined, and criminal charges looming, they had nothing left to lose. Cornered people with broken morals always strike hardest. I fortified the lake house security once more, upgrading my alarm system to emergency police dispatch mode and enabling real-time alert streaming to my phone. I was prepared for vandalism, trespassing, or online slander. But I was not prepared for how personal and cruel their next move would be. The following evening, dusk fell soft and quiet over the lake. I was inside the house tidying up Robert's old belongings, running my fingers over the worn cover of his favorite journal, clinging to the piece I'd fought so hard to reclaim. The day was calm, no alerts, no suspicious activity. Too calm. Then my neighbor's frantic call broke the silence. "Margaret, get outside right now. They're here. They're messing with your dock." My heart lurched. I grabbed my phone and rushed to the back window overlooking the lake. And what I saw stole the breath from my lungs. Lindsay and Tyler were on my private wooden dock. The one Robert had built entirely by hand the final summer before he fell ill. Tools littered the planks at their feet. They were prying loose the support beams, yanking nails free, sawing through the wooden frame piece by piece. They weren't just vandalizing property. They were destroying Robert's last legacy. The dock had been his pride and joy. Every weekend, he'd worked on it alone, sweating through the heat, determined to build me a place to watch the sunrise over the water after he was gone. It was where we'd shared our last anniversary picnic, where he'd held my hand and promised me peaceful days ahead. It was sacred to me, and they were tearing it apart, beam by beam. Out of pure vengeful spite, I threw open the back door and raced onto the lawn, shouting for them to stop. At the sound of my voice, they froze for a split second, but they did not run. Instead, they turned, faces twisted with rage, emboldened by their own cruelty. "You want to keep this house so bad?" Tyler yelled across the water. "We'll destroy every last piece of it until there's nothing left for you to cling to." Lindsay stood beside him, unapologetic and cold, her voice sharp and merciless. "You took our future. We'll take every memory you have of Dad. Fair trade." Those words cut deeper than any damage they could do to wood and nails. She knew exactly what that dock meant to me. She knew it was my most precious connection to my late husband. And she chose to destroy it anyway, just to hurt me. By the time the sheriff's squad cars arrived minutes later, half the dock's support structure was compromised. Planks floated loose in the shallow lake water, splintered and broken beyond simple repair. Robert's handiwork, decades of careful labor, lay ruined in the waves. Officers swarmed the scene immediately. This time, there was no escape, no room for excuses. They were caught red-handed on private property, actively committing felony criminal destruction of property. Violating their formal trespass warning in the most blatant way possible, they were arrested on the spot. AS officers placed handcuffs on them and led them toward the patrol car. Lindsay finally snapped. All her arrogance melted into hysterical, furious tears. She twisted toward me, screaming accusations into the twilight. "This is your fault. You did this. You chose the house over me. You're a terrible mother." Tyler stayed silent, his head hung low, realizing too late they'd crossed an irreversible line. Their reckless vengeance was no longer a civil dispute or family drama. It was a criminal offense with serious, lifelong consequences. I stood alone on the broken lawn, staring at the splintered remains of my husband's dock, my chest tight with grief and disbelief. I had fought to save my home, my reputation, my peace, but they had deliberately destroyed the last physical piece of the man I loved, yet even as tears stung my eyes, my resolve hardened into unbreakable steel. This was no longer a fight over property, inheritance, or family misunderstanding. This was deliberate, cruel retaliation. And this time, there would be no mercy, no second chances, no quiet settlement. They had broken everything I held dear. Now they would face the full, unforgiving weight of the law. Lindsay's threatening text lingered on my screen long after I'd read it, every word a brutal reminder of how far my only child had fallen. For decades, I'd shielded her from hardship, forgiven her mistakes, and bailed her out of every careless mess she'd made. I'd always chosen family over pride, peace over punishment. But her cold ultimatum stripped away the last of my maternal leniency. Mercy only worked for people who knew how to regret their actions. Lindsay and Tyler were not those people. I did not hesitate. I forwarded the threatening message to my lawyer and the sheriff's department, adding it to the mountain of evidence documenting their stalking, defamation, trespassing, and harassment. Every desperate, malicious move they made only cemented how dangerous and unhinged they'd become in their greed-fueled rage. Knowing they were capable of escalating further, I upgraded every security measure at the lake house. I installed motion sensor floodlights, 24/7 continuous recording cameras covering every inch of the property, and a direct emergency alert system that notified police the second any unauthorized person stepped onto my land. I would not be caught off guard again. For 2 days, radio silence followed. No texts, no calls, no online attacks. It was the quiet before the storm, a deceptive calm that let me know they were plotting something far worse than social media lies or petty vandalism. On the third night, I got the first alert just after midnight. My security system pinged rapid motion detection at the rear tree line bordering my lake property. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live feed, and my blood turned to ice. Lindsay and Tyler were back. This time, they came prepared. They wore dark hoodies, their faces partially covered, carrying heavy tools and large gas cans. They moved fast and furtive, no longer careless or reckless. They were deliberate, focused, and deadly serious. They'd snuck past the roadside patrols, evaded neighborhood watch eyes, and slipped onto my land under the cover of pure darkness. I watched through the camera lens as they marched straight toward the lake, toward the handcrafted wooden dock Robert had built for me. The dock they'd already damaged days prior. The last living piece of my husband's legacy. It was clear now. Their earlier destruction had never been enough. They didn't just want to ruin my property, they wanted to erase every single trace of Robert and our life together. They wanted to burn the dock to the waterline, reduce his years of labor to ash, and leave me with nothing but empty land and broken memories. Tyler knelt on the splintered planks, twisting open the cap of a gas can, dousing the wooden beams with flammable liquid. Lindsay stood watch, scanning the shadows for any sign of me or police, her posture cold and unflinching. There was no hesitation, no flicker of guilt, no recognition of how unforgivably cruel their plan was. They were willing to commit felony arson, risk blowing up the entire lakeside property, and destroy priceless sentimental heritage, all to get revenge on the mother who'd given them everything. I dialed 911 instantly, my voice steady but tight with suppressed grief and anger. I relayed their exact location, their actions, and the live camera proof streaming straight to dispatch. Within minutes, multiple patrol units and a local fire department team were dispatched to the lake. By the time the first squad car's lights flashed over the water, Tyler had already struck a match. The tiny flame hovered in his fingers, seconds away from igniting the gasoline-soaked wood. Drop it. Hands up. Officers shouted, sprinting across the lawn with flashlights blazing. Panic exploded across their faces. Tyler froze, the match trembling in his grip. Lindsay spun around, eyes wide with terror, finally realizing they'd run out of lies, out of chances, and out of time. The match fell harmlessly to the wet grass, snuffed out instantly. Their final, most vicious plan was thwarted mere seconds from disaster. Officers swarmed the dock, cuffing both of them on the spot. This was no longer a simple civil dispute, no longer a family misunderstanding, no longer petty vandalism. This was premeditated arson, a violent felony offense carrying years of potential jail time. As they were led toward the patrol cars, Lindsay broke completely. She thrashed against the handcuffs, screaming my name into the night air, her voice raw and hysterical. This is all your fault. You ruined our lives. You refused to let us have anything. I stood on my porch in the cool night breeze, watching them being detained. Every ounce of lingering motherly sorrow finally stripped away. I didn't ruin your lives, I said quietly, loud enough for her to hear. You ruined them the day you decided to steal, lie, burn, and threaten the only person who ever loved you unconditionally. Tyler stayed silent, his head bowed in defeat, fully aware they had crossed every possible line of redemption. Their greed had turned a family conflict into a serious criminal case, one that would haunt their records forever. The next morning, I received official confirmation from my attorney. The district attorney's office had formally pressed felony charges against both Lindsay and Tyler. All prior appeals and counterclaims were permanently dismissed. There would be no more bargaining, no more delays, no more second chances. The final court hearing was scheduled in 1 week's time, a criminal trial that would decide their fate once and for all. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in months, I knew one truth beyond all doubt: I would never again let my kindness be mistaken for weakness. The week leading up to the criminal trial dragged on slow and heavy, filled with quiet dread and restless anticipation. I spent every day compiling the final pieces of my case, organizing security footage, police reports, text threats, witness statements, and records of their months-long harassment campaign. What began as a bitter family dispute had fully transformed into a serious felony criminal trial, and there was no turning back for any of us. Word of the case had spread throughout the small lake community. Neighbors, former hospital colleagues, and local residents all knew the full truth now: how my own daughter and son-in-law had locked a grieving widow out of her lifelong dream home, vandalized her property, smeared her name online, and even plotted premeditated arson to destroy her late husband's last legacy. Support poured in from every side, but I found no joy in it. There was no victory in watching my only child spiral into criminal behavior, no satisfaction in preparing to testify against the girl I'd raised and loved more than anything in the world. All I felt was a hollow, aching sorrow, mixed with unshakable resolve to protect myself and Robert's memory. Lindsay and Tyler spent the entire week in pretrial release, free on bond but ordered to have zero contact with me or my property. Yet even with a court-ordered restraining order hanging over their heads, they refused to surrender. They hired a desperate public defender, one known for bending rules and fighting aggressively to dismiss felony charges. Instead of choosing humility and remorse to plead for leniency, they doubled down on their lies. They told their attorney I was a bitter, vengeful mother obsessed with punishing them over a simple family misunderstanding. They claimed the gasoline was only for lawn equipment, the match a harmless mistake, and their midnight trespass nothing more than a late-night visit to check on the house. They were ready to lie under oath to save themselves. The day of the criminal trial arrived cold and gray. The courtroom was packed with spectators, local community members, and court staff, all curious to witness the shocking family fallout that had shaken our small town. Lindsay and Tyler walked in wearing stiff, formal clothing, their faces stripped of the hysterical rage they'd shown the night of their arrest. They'd crafted brand new personas: quiet, remorseful, misunderstood young adults victimized by an unforgiving, cruel mother. As the trial opened, their defense attorney delivered a passionate, manipulative opening statement. He painted me as a lonely, grieving woman unable to process my husband's death, taking my pain and grief out on my own daughter. He argued that Lindsay and Tyler's actions were nothing more than misguided attempts to preserve family property, their poor choices stemming from stress and confusion, not malice or greed. These two young people never intended harm, the attorney insisted. They acted out of love for their family home. This prosecution is nothing more than a mother's petty revenge, blowing a trivial family fight into a felony criminal case. For a moment, the courtroom wavered. Some spectators shifted in their seats, swayed by the emotional manipulation. It was the same tactic they'd used from the very beginning: twist truth into victimhood, turn the abuser into the abused. But the prosecution had irrefutable, unbreakable evidence. One by one, they laid out every damning detail. They played the crystal-clear night vision security footage for the entire courtroom to see: Lindsay and Tyler sneaking onto my property in total darkness, fully disguised, carrying large gasoline cans with no equipment in sight. The video showed Tyler deliberately dousing the wooden dock in flammable liquid, Lindsay standing guard to block any interruption, and the pair preparing to burn the entire structure to the ground. They presented the full timeline of threats: Lindsay's ultimatum text demanding I drop all legal action or face worse consequences, months of escalating harassment, their calculated online defamation campaign, and their prior acts of vandalism and illegal trespass. The prosecution called my lake neighbor to the stand, who testified under oath about witnessing their repeated suspicious visits, their destructive behavior on my property, and their hostile attitude toward me. By the time I took the stand, the courtroom's sympathy for Lindsay and Tyler had vanished entirely. I spoke softly but firmly, laying out decades of sacrifice, the double shifts, the skipped vacations, the years of hard labor Robert and I endured to build that home. I described the grief of losing my husband, the peace I'd found in our lake house, and the unthinkable betrayal of being locked out, vandalized, and targeted for destruction by my own family. I never asked for perfection from my daughter, I testified, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. I only asked for gratitude, for basic respect for the life her father and I built. I forgave every mistake, every selfish choice, every thoughtless act. But I cannot forgive someone who tries to burn my husband's memory to ash just to get revenge. When the defense cross-examined me, they tried to break my composure, pressing me to admit I was being too harsh, too unforgiving, too unwilling to reconcile with my child. I met their gaze without hesitation. Mercy is a choice I give to people who earn it. My daughter and her husband chose greed, destruction, and violence over family. I do not owe them forgiveness. Cornered and desperate, Lindsay took the stand in her own defense. She broke down in fake tears, sobbing and claiming I'd abandoned her emotionally after her father's death. That I'd grown cold and distant, that she'd only acted out of fear of losing her family's home forever. It was her most convincing performance yet, but the prosecution shattered her lies in seconds. They pulled up her old social media posts, her mocking captions, her boasts about stealing the house early, and her cruel comments celebrating my loneliness. They contrasted her tearful courtroom claims with her months of deliberate cruelty. Proving her victim act was nothing but a last-minute lie, Tyler took the stand afterward, attempting to take partial blame, claiming he'd pressured Lindsay into every bad choice, painting her as a naive, manipulated victim at his mercy. He tried to absorb all the fault to clear Lindsay's name, hoping to save her from a criminal conviction. It was a desperate, coordinated final play to divide their charges and save Lindsay's future. The jury retreated to deliberate for hours, weighing the mountain of evidence against their tearful, last-minute apologies. The courtroom waited in tense, suffocating silence, every second stretching on endlessly. When the jury finally returned, the room went completely quiet, but before the verdict could be read, the judge paused, leaning forward with a grave expression that sent a fresh wave of tension through everyone present. Before this court delivers a verdict, she announced firmly, new supplemental evidence has been submitted to the court this morning. Evidence that changes the scope of this entire case. My heart skipped a beat. Lindsay and Tyler froze in their seats, their fake remorse instantly fading into raw, terrified panic. Whatever was coming next, neither of us saw it coming. The trial was not ending with a simple verdict. A new, explosive secret was about to unravel everything.